we will discuss the maintenance of power by ruling groups or castes after establishing a state. Force is used by the ruling class, but their main problem is ideological. For the government to stay in power, they must have the acceptance and support of the majority of its subjects. The support need not be active enthusiasm, but it must be some form of acceptance. Without it, the minority of state rulers will eventually be outweighed by the active resistance of the majority of the public. Therefore, the chief task of the rulers is always to secure the active or resigned acceptance of the majority of the citizens. One method of securing support is through the creation of vested economic interests. The king alone cannot rule. He must have a sizable group of followers who enjoy the prerequisites of rule. This includes the members of the state apparatus, such as the full-time bureaucracy or the established nobility. However, this still secures only a minority of eager supporters, and even the essential purchasing of support by subsidies and other grants of privilege still does not obtain the consent of the majority. For the majority to accept the government, they must be persuaded by ideology that their government is good, wise, and inevitable, and certainly better than other conceivable alternatives. Promoting this ideology among the people is the vital social task of the intellectuals. The intellectuals are the opinion molders in society, and since it is precisely a molding of opinion that the state most desperately needs, the basis for the age-old alliance between the state and the intellectuals becomes clear. It is evident that the state needs the intellectuals, but it is not so evident why intellectuals need the state. The intellectuals' livelihood in the free market is never too secure, for they must depend on the values and choices of the masses of their fellow men, and it is precisely characteristic of the masses that they are generally uninterested in intellectual matters. The state, on the other hand, is willing to offer the intellectuals a secure and permanent berth in the state apparatus, and thus a secure income and the panoply of prestige. Many and varied have been the arguments by which the state and its intellectuals have induced their subjects to support their rule. Basically, the strands of argument may be summed up as follows. A. The state rulers are great and wise men, much greater and wiser than the good but rather simple subjects, and B. Rule by the extent government is inevitable, absolutely necessary, and far better than the indescribable evils that would ensue upon its downfall. The union of church and state was one of the oldest and most successful of these ideological devices. The ruler was either anointed by God or, in the case of the absolute rule of many Oriental despotisms, was himself God. Hence, any resistance to his rule would be blasphemy. The state's priestcraft performed the basic intellectual function of obtaining popular support and even worship for the rulers. Another successful device was to instill fear of any alternative systems of rule or non-rule. The present rulers, it was maintained, supply to the citizens an essential service for which they should be most grateful: protection against sporadic criminals and marauders. Especially has the state been successful in recent centuries in instilling fear of other state rulers. Since the land area of the globe has been parceled out among particular states, one of the basic doctrines of the state was to identify itself with the territory it governed. Since most men tend to love their homeland, the identification of that land and its people with the state was a means of making natural patriotism work to the state's advantage. Subscribe Libertarian Facts.